The chamber was enormous. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood alone in its center, surrounded by empty air that dropped into darkness below his feet. Above him, the ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into shadows that even the brightest lights could not reach. Around him, rising in perfect circles like an ancient amphitheater, sat the representatives of 417 alien species. This was the heart of galactic power, the place where civilizations lived or died based on a single vote. Webb felt the weight of thousands of eyes watching him. Some of those eyes were familiar to human biology. Others were compound structures that covered entire heads. Some species had no eyes at all, sensing him through methods Earth scientists were still trying to understand. But all of them were focused on one thing: him, the human, the problem they needed to solve. Hi. Chancellor Vornthik spoke first. His voice came through translation devices that touched every mind in the chamber, making his words feel like thoughts appearing inside Webb's own head. Ambassador Webb of Earth, you stand accused of crimes against the Galactic Order. Do you understand the charges? Webb kept his hands behind his back. His voice was calm. I understand them, Chancellor. Then you know why you are here. I know why you think I'm here, Webb said. But I suspect we have different interpretations of these events. A ripple of sound moved through the assembled aliens. Some made clicking noises. Others produced deep rumbles that vibrated through the floor. A few released chemical signals that Webb's translator couldn't process, but his instincts recognized as hostile. Vornthik's skin changed color, shifting from pale blue to deep purple. Webb had studied the Chancellor's species long enough to know this meant anger. Your species has been part of galactic society for 200 years, Vornthik said. In that time, you have been given knowledge, protection, and guidance. We welcomed you despite your primitive nature. Despite your violent history, despite concerns from multiple member species that humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable. Webb said nothing. He had learned that silence often revealed more than questions. And how have you repaid this generosity? Vornthik continued. By violating the preservation protocols, by developing forbidden technologies, by expanding your military presence beyond approved limits, by refusing to accept the wisdom of species that have existed for millions of years before your ancestors learned to use fire. A holographic display activated above Webb's head. Images appeared, massive and clear, visible to every being in the chamber. They showed human starships with unusual designs, research facilities on distant worlds, scientists working on equipment that glowed with strange energies. Project Threshold, announced Prime Arbiter Kelstra, her voice sharp as broken glass. Your people have been developing quantum displacement technology. Technology that should be impossible for a species at your development level. Technology that took the Velkarin people 3 million years to achieve. She paused, letting the words sink in. You accomplished it in less than 500 years since your Industrial Revolution. Explain how this is possible without violating the restrictions placed on your research. Webb finally moved. He took one step forward. It was a small movement, but in the vast silence of the chamber, it felt significant. You want to know how we did it? He asked. We studied. We learned. We built on the work of every species that came before us. We took the mathematics from the Thurnrack. We used philosophical frameworks from the Eldest Collective. We analyzed Velkarin engineering principles. We stood on the shoulders of giants and reached higher. We stole classified information. Someone shouted from the upper levels. We learned from publicly available research. Webb corrected. If the knowledge exists and we can understand it through legitimate study, that's not theft. That's education. Delegate Hancor rose from his seat. His 8 legs clicked against the metal floor as he moved to a better position. You speak of education as if it excuses your recklessness. Do you know why the preservation protocols exist, human? Do you know how many civilizations have destroyed themselves by advancing too quickly? I know the official reasons, Webb said. I know what the Council claims. But I also know what I've observed in 200 years of human participation in galactic affairs. And what is that? Vornthik demanded. That the preservation protocols aren't about safety. They're about control. The chamber erupted. Aliens of 100 different species began talking, shouting, making sounds of outrage. Some stood from their seats. Others activated communication devices, probably reporting this moment to their home worlds. Vornthik raised one massive hand. Slowly, the noise subsided. "You make a serious accusation," he said quietly. Somehow, his quiet voice was more threatening than his earlier anger. "Choose your next words carefully, Ambassador." Webb met the Chancellor's gaze directly. "For 200 years, Earth has followed your rules. We've accepted your inspections. We've allowed you to limit our research, our expansion, our growth. We've asked for permission before taking any significant action. And in those 200 years, I've watched the Council fail repeatedly. Failed." Kelstra's voice dripped with contempt. "We have maintained peace for 12,000 years. You've maintained stagnation," Webb said. "I've watched you ignore wars in the Outer Rim. I've seen you refuse to help during humanitarian crises. I've witnessed the Council spend more time debating procedural rules than solving real problems. And every time humanity offered to help, offered solutions, offered technologies that could save lives, we were told no. Because you lack wisdom." Honkor shouted. "You are children playing with forces you cannot possibly understand." "We understand perfectly," Webb said. "We understand that you're afraid. Not that we'll fail. That we'll succeed. That will prove your entire system is built on keeping young species dependent on old ones. That will show the galaxy there's another way." Vornthik stood to his full height. He was enormous, easily 3 times Webb size. "The Council has reached its decision. Humanity will submit to complete technological regression. You will surrender all quantum research. You will dismantle all military installations beyond your home system. You will accept permanent Council oversight with full authority over your scientific establishment." Security drones began descending from the ceiling. Their weapons were powered and ready. "And you, Ambassador Webb," Vornthik continued, "will be detained pending trial." Instead, he smiled. It was a small expression, barely noticeable, but somehow it made several nearby delegates uncomfortable. "You could have worked with us," Webb said softly. "You could have treated us as partners. But you chose fear over cooperation. So understand this, Chancellor. This isn't just your judgment of humanity. This is the moment you force us to make a choice." "You have no choice," Vornthik said. "Submit or face isolation. There's always a choice." Webb touched a device on his wrist. Suddenly, every human ship in orbit vanished. Not destroyed, gone. Disappeared in flashes of light that could be seen. Even from the Council chamber and Webb's solid form, began to shimmer like heat. Waves on a desert road? Consider this humanity's. Answer, the holographic projection said. We're done asking permission. We're done accepting rules designed to limit us. We're done with the Galactic Council. The image flickered. As of this moment, Earth withdraws from all Council authority. You wanted us contained? You have it. But on our terms, not yours. The hologram vanished. The platform stood empty, and 417 species sat in stunned silence, none of them understanding what they had just lost. 200 years earlier, Captain Alina Torres had been the first human to meet an alien civilization. She had expected many things when her ship made its experimental jump into faster-than-light travel. Death, perhaps. Or discovery. Maybe even glory. What she got instead was paperwork. The alien administrator at the way station, a tall being named Arthmas with too many arms and eyes that moved independently, looked at her ship with obvious disappointment. Another primitive species, RFMs had said through a translation device. How did you even manage faster-than-light travel with such basic technology? Alina had felt her pride stinging. We worked hard. We took risks. We succeeded. Got lucky, Arthams corrected. Please dock at port 17. You'll need to complete contact forms, submit to biological screening, and attend an orientation session. It usually takes about 7 standard cycles. That was humanity's introduction to the galaxy. Not wonder. Not excitement. Bureaucracy. But humans learned quickly. They always had. 5 years later, Ambassador James Garrett stood before the newly formed Galactic Council and made Earth's first official request. We want to join as full members. We want to contribute to galactic civilization. The Council had debated for 6 months before agreeing. Even then, the agreement came with conditions. Restrictions on research, limits on expansion, required inspections and oversight. Humanity was welcome, but only if they stayed in their designated place. For 50 years, humans accepted these terms. They followed the rules. They proved themselves useful in ways the galaxy hadn't expected. When agricultural blight threatened food supplies across a quarter of the galaxy, human scientists developed resistant crop varieties in days. The eldest collective had called the solution crude but effective. Worked. Billions were fed. When 2 powerful empires nearly went to war over mining rights, human negotiator Rachel Nomura suggested something simple. Share the resources. Split the profits. Rotate control. Both sides agreed. It's embarrassed they hadn't thought of it themselves. When plague killed millions on the water worlds, human Dr. David Okonkwo recognized the disease. Earth had dealt with something similar centuries ago. The cure was old, simple, and available. Within weeks, the dying stopped. For 50 years, this pattern repeated. Humans found solutions to problems that had stumped galactic civilization. They approached challenges from angles that older species had forgotten existed. They asked questions that seemed naive, but revealed hidden assumptions, and the Council tolerated it, encouraged it even. Humans were useful, clever, good at solving the small problems that didn't seem worth the Council's time, but they were still children. Still primitive, still needing guidance from their elders. That was the Council's first mistake. They saw humanity's success as luck instead of capability. Ambassador. Laura Kim made her request 60 years after first contact. We want access to the galactic archives, the restricted sections. There's medical research there that could help billions. Energy systems that could transform worlds. Knowledge that humanity could use to contribute even more to galactic welfare? The Council said no. The restricted archives contain dangerous knowledge, High Chancellor Vornthick explained. Technologies that could destabilize the galactic order, information that species below Category 7 development cannot safely possess. We're not asking for weapons, Kim argued. We're asking for knowledge. Knowledge is power, Kelstra said. And power in the wrong hands is dangerous. The restrictions exist for good reasons, Ambassador. Trust that we know better. Kim returned to Earth without the access she requested, but she didn't return defeated. If the Council wouldn't share knowledge, humanity would acquire it differently. The Great Research Initiative began quietly. Earth's best scientists, engineers, and mathematicians started working on a massive project. They would reverse engineer every piece of alien technology they could legally access. They would study every public document. They would learn everything the Council allowed them to know, and then push beyond it. Within 20 years, human ships matched Velkarin's speed and efficiency. Within 30 years, human computers outperformed Thernrak quantum systems. Within 50 years, human medical technology surpassed anything commonly available in the galaxy, the Council noticed. They're advancing too quickly, Delegate Hancor warned. At this rate, humans will reach Category 10 development in another century. That took my species 9 million years. Perhaps your species was inefficient, suggested Delegate Mortek. He was one of the few Council members who viewed humanity positively. Humans evolved on a death world. They spent their entire history fighting impossible odds. They learned to adapt or die. That created a culture of innovation that most species abandoned millions of years ago. It created a culture of danger, Hancor countered. I propose we invoke the preservation protocols. Slow their development before they become a threat. The vote was close. 247 species agreed. 170 opposed. Humanity would be restricted. When Ambassador Thomas Wright heard the decision, he asked one simple question. Why? For the stability of the galaxy, Vornthick answered. Whose stability? Wright pressed. Because from where I'm standing, the galaxy seems pretty unstable already. You have wars you won't stop. Humanitarian crises you ignore. Slavery you condemn in words, but allow in practice. Maybe the problem isn't that humanity is advancing too quickly. Maybe the problem is that everyone else stopped advancing at all. Chamber had erupted in outrage. But Wright stood his ground. The restrictions came anyway. Human research required council approval. Technology transfers were heavily monitored. Human ships needed escorts in certain systems. Earth's expansion was confined to specific zones. Humanity complied. Mostly, but in secret laboratories across human space. Researchers continued working. They shared data through encrypted channels. They asked questions the council said were settled, and found that the answers were more complex than anyone admitted. Project Threshold began 15 years before Marcus Webb stood in that judgment chamber. The goal was ambitious. Develop quantum displacement technology independently. Prove it could be done safely. Show the galaxy that the preservation protocols were obsolete. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo led the team. She was 43 years old and brilliant. Her grandfather had saved the Mercian people from plague. She intended to free humanity from unnecessary restrictions. The council thinks we're reckless, she told her team. They think we'll destroy ourselves playing with forces we don't understand. So let's prove them wrong. Let's show them that intelligence isn't about age or evolution time. It's about the willingness to question, to explore, to risk failure for the chance at truth. They succeeded. And when the council discovered Project Threshold, they panicked, which brought Marcus Webb to that chamber, delivering humanity's ultimatum. Watching the council shock as Earth withdrew from there, authority completely. But the council didn't understand what they had truly lost. They were about to learn. 3 days after humanity withdrew from the Galactic Council, Chancellor Vornthik called an emergency session. Every delegate who remained gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall. The chamber felt different now. Empty seats created shadows where there had been none before. The human withdrawal is temporary, Vornthik announced with confidence he didn't entirely feel. Young species often react emotionally to necessary restrictions. They'll return once they understand the consequences of isolation. Delegate Mortek activated a display that showed the entire galaxy. With respect, Chancellor, I'm not certain the humans view this as isolation. Look at the data. The display changed. It showed human activities across space. Every human embassy had been evacuated. Every installation dismantled. Every commercial agreement terminated. Human ships had stopped using council waypoints entirely. They didn't abandon their positions, Mortek explained. They organized a complete withdrawal. Every person, every piece of equipment, everything valuable. They planned this. Good Delegate Hancor said. Let them isolate themselves. The galaxy managed perfectly well before humans arrived. Mortek asked quietly. Over the next weeks, reports began arriving from across the galaxy. None of them were good. On Velker Prime, Dr. Thelmos sat in his laboratory, staring at equations he couldn't solve. His research partner, Dr. Angela Rivera from Earth, had been recalled 3 days ago. She had left detailed notes, complete data, and a gap in their research that Thelmus couldn't fill alone. Angela had ways of seeing problems that didn't occur to him. She asked questions that seemed simple, but revealed assumptions he didn't know he was making. Without her, progress had stopped. I don't need her, Thelmus told himself repeatedly. I'm a Category 8 intellect. She's barely Category 4 by council standards. But the work she had done sat on his screen. Elegant and functional, and he couldn't replicate her intuitive leaps. On the colony world of New Tharsis, Governor Kralonik faced crisis. Human agricultural advisors had transformed 3 continents of wasteland into productive farmland. Now those advisors were gone. The crops they had designed were entering harvest season, and no one knew exactly how to proceed. They left instructions, his aide offered. Instructions designed for humans to follow, Kralonik snapped. Our workers don't think like them. These crops require precise timing, specific techniques. One mistake, and we lose everything. The Mercian Collective faced immediate disaster. Human medical teams had been integrated into their healthcare system for nearly a century. Mercian physiology was complex. Human doctors had developed treatments that worked through approaches Mercian. Physicians found counterintuitive. High Physician Shalron attended her 20th emergency case in as many hours. The patient was dying from what should have been treatable. The human protocols recommend reducing the antibiotic dose by half, her assistant said, confused, and adding a compound we classify as mildly toxic. That's insane, Shalron said. But she had watched human doctors treat this exact condition successfully many times using that exact protocol. She made the decision. The patient stabilized. How did they know? Her assistant asked. Scholl's single quotes. Wren had no answer. On Earth, Marcus Webb reviewed reports from across human space. Director Jennifer Parks stood beside him. The council issued statements calling our withdrawal temporary and emotional, Park reported. They expect us back within 6 months. Webb smiled grimly. They still don't understand. What's the status of the Threshold Network? Operational across all human systems? We can move ships instantaneously between any quantum-linked gates. Travel time between Earth and our furthest colony dropped from 6 months to 6 seconds. And our research? Fully independent. Without council restrictions, we estimate achieving Category 10 equivalent technology within 20 years instead of 2 centuries. Webb nodded. What about humanitarian operations? Park's expression softened. We've received 347 requests for assistance from non-council worlds. Species the council classified as too primitive for contact are desperate for help. Can we help them? We already are. Medical teams deployed to 4 plague worlds. Agricultural specialists helping 7 famine zones. Engineers bringing clean water to a dozen systems. All outside council jurisdiction. Good, Webb said. Let the council manage bureaucracy. We'll manage actual problems. Back on council station, Chancellor Vornthik received private communication from Mortek. We have a problem. Economic analysis is complete. Humanity's withdrawal will cost the council economy 4 trillion credits in the first year. Vornthik's skin flushed purple. 4 trillion how? Trade agreements, technology licenses, consulting fees, joint ventures. Humans were involved in 6,000 major projects across council space. Most are now stalled or failing. Mortek paused. But that's not the worst part. Humanity wasn't just participating in our economy. They were innovating it. They found efficiencies we'd stopped looking for. Created markets we never considered. Without them, we're not just losing their contributions. We're losing their capacity to make everything better. Vornthik ended the communication. A cold fear was growing inside him. For 2 centuries, he had watched humans solve problems the council declared unsolvable. He had attributed it to luck, to naive enthusiasm, to the recklessness of youth. What if he had been wrong? What if humanity's rapid advancement wasn't dangerous or unnatural, but simply what happened when intelligence developed without artificial constraints? What if the preservation protocols weren't protecting the galaxy but crippling it? No, impossible. The protocols had stood for 12,000 years. They had prevented wars, stopped dangerous technologies, maintained stability. They were necessary. They were right. They had to be. Because if they weren't, then everything Vornthik believed was a lie designed to protect old species at the expense of new ones. He pushed the thought away and prepared another statement about humanity's eventual return, but across the galaxy. Species were making different calculations. They were comparing the Council's empty promises with humanity's actual help. They were measuring bureaucracy against results. They were choosing sides, and more chose humanity every day. The Council just didn't know it yet. 6 months after humanity withdrew, War Master Krethvel of the Kreshkarn Dominion received an unexpected transmission. A human ship had entered his territory. A small vessel, broadcasting on open channels. What? This is Captain Lisa Monroe of the Earth vessel Liberation. We're here to speak with the Havron people. We know you're listening, War Master. We know what you're doing here, and we're offering the Havron a choice. Krethval laughed. The sound was like grinding stone. The Havron are property. They have no choices. Everyone has choices, Monroe replied. Havron people, if you want freedom, if you want to escape Kreshkarn control, signal us. We'll get you out. You'll die trying, Krethval promised. He dispatched 3 warships. What happened next became legend. The human ship didn't fight. It didn't need to. As Kreshkarn vessels closed for the kill, the Liberation activated something new. A quantum field that encompassed the entire slave colony below. 400,000 Havrons simply vanished. Teleported instantaneously to a human colony world light years away, Krethval's weapons locked on the Liberation. Before he could fire, 12 human warships appeared from nowhere, surrounding his forces. The Havron are free, Monroe said. Accept it and leave, or start a war with Earth. Your choice, War Master. Krethval wasn't used to being challenged. He opened fire. The battle lasted 47 seconds. Human shields absorbed everything without flickering. Human weapons disabled all 3 Kreshkarn ships without destroying them. Precision strikes that left vessels powerless but crews alive. Next time we won't be gentle, Monroe said. Spread the word. Humanity accepts refugees from any species under Kreshkarn control. Try to stop us again, and see what happens. The human ships vanished. Krethval floated in a disabled vessel, surrounded by shocked crew, processing the impossible. Humans had just humiliated the Kreshkarn Empire. In under a minute, he sent an emergency message to the Council. Chancellor Vornthik read the report with growing horror. They attacked a Council member state. They rescued slaves, Mortek corrected, and disabled military vessels without casualties. They showed more restraint than the Kreshkarn have shown in 8,000 years. That's not the point. Vornthik slammed his appendage down. They violated Council jurisdiction. They took unilateral military action. Action the Council refused to take, Mortek noted. How many times did we condemn Kreshkarn slavery? How many times did we actually do anything? This sets dangerous precedent, Kelstra said. If humanity can ignore Council authority, they're not ignoring it, Mortek interrupted. They withdrew from it. They're not bound by our rules anymore. Then we bring them back, Vornthik decided. Open negotiations. Offer them, ... Offer them what? Mortek asked quietly. What can we offer a species developing faster without us than they ever did with us? The question hung unanswered. Across the galaxy, consequences cascaded. Dr. Thelmus finally admitted defeat. He sent a message to Dr. Angela Rivera. I was wrong. We need you. Please come back. Her response came quickly. I'd love to, Thel, but I can't. Council restrictions nearly killed our partnership a dozen times. I accomplished more in a month working independently than I did in years fighting bureaucracy. If you want to collaborate, join me at New Cambridge. No restrictions. No oversight. Just science. Thelma stared at the invitation. Leave Velkar Prime. Leave the Council's establishment? Unthinkable. But so was spending his career making no progress. On New Tharsis, Governor Kralenik lost a quarter of his harvest due to mishandling human-designed crops. Famine loomed. He appealed to the Council for aid. The Council sent a committee to study the problem. Humans. Sent ships full of food and volunteers to teach proper techniques. They didn't ask permission. They just helped. Kralenik stood in fields watching human and Tharisian workers together. He realized something profound. Humans had never needed Council permission to be who they were. The Council had needed humanity far more than humanity ever needed the Council. The Mercian Collective faced the hardest truth. Without human medical personnel, death rates increased 30%. High Physician Shalron reviewed statistics with despair. We're dying, she told the Mercian High Council. Our people are dying because we don't understand human medical philosophy. They think about health differently. and we can't replicate it. Then petition them to return, someone suggested. Return to what? Shalron asked. The council that restricted them. Why would they return to that? She sent her own message to Dr. Patricio Conquo. We need help. Not as council members appealing to restricted partners? As friends asking friends? Patricia's response was immediate. We never stopped wanting to help. But we needed freedom to help effectively. I'm sending medical teams tomorrow. No oversight. No restrictions. Just doctors treating patients? Reports flooded council headquarters. 17 worlds requested direct human aid, bypassing council channels. 8 member species had scientists petitioning to work at human facilities outside council jurisdiction. 3 trading groups established agreements with Earth more favorable than anything the council offered. Most damning. 42 primitive species that the council classified as too dangerous to contact had been quietly helped by human missions. Clean water installed. Diseases cured. Agricultural improvements shared. All without fanfare or bureaucracy. Delegate Handcore addressed an emergency session, voice shaking. The humans are building an alternative to the council. A rival power structure. Or, Mortek said softly. They're demonstrating what we could have been if we'd spent 12,000 years helping species instead of controlling them. That's sedition. That's reality, Mortek replied. Look at the data. In 6 months, humanity accomplished more humanitarian work than the council did in the past decade. They stopped slavery we only condemned. They solved problems we declared unsolvable. Without treaties, without bureaucracy, without committees, they just help because they can. Chancellor Vornthik felt control slipping. This council maintained galactic order for 12 millennia. This council maintained status quo, Mortek corrected. There's a difference. Order implies justice, fairness, progress. We maintained a system where old species control young ones, where innovation is suppressed, where help is rationed rather than freely given. In the silence that followed, every delegate faced the question they'd avoided for months. What if humanity was right to leave? What if the preservation protocols protected old species from competition instead of protecting the galaxy from danger? What if 12,000 years of stability was actually 12,000 years of stagnation? The session ended with no answers. Only growing dread, because across the galaxy species were choosing. And more chose humanity's way over the sea. Ouncils. The exodus was accelerating. 1 year after humanity withdrew, the Grand Assembly Hall felt hollow. Chancellor Vornthik stood before 291 species. Down from 417? The exodus had been gradual, then rapid. We must face facts, he began without his former authority. Humanity's withdrawal created a crisis. Member species questioned council leadership. Some left to pursue partnerships with Earth. Others simply drifted away, finding us irrelevant. Delegate Handcore stood. This is temporary. Young species will learn freedom without structure leads to chaos. Humans will overextend and come crawling back, will they? Mortek asked. He activated a galaxy-wide display that made delegates gasp. 1 year ago, council activities dominated every category. Now human-initiated actions glowed brightly across space while council influence had shrunk dramatically. Earth established peaceful contact with 73 species we classified as too primitive or dangerous. Mortek reported. They resolved 6 armed conflicts through mediation, cured for diseases, shared technology freely. Their economy grew 400%, while ours contracted 27%. Reckless expansion, Handcore protested. Building a house of cards that will collapse. Or, a new voice said, building what we should have built millennia ago. Delegate Shalon of the Mercian Collective stepped forward. She was ancient, her species in the council for 8,000 years. I've lived long enough to watch this council become calcified, she continued, afraid of change. Invested in preserving position rather than serving purpose. Humans didn't just withdraw. They freed themselves from our limitations and showed us what we've become. We've become stable. Vornthik argued. We've become stagnant, Shalron corrected, and called it wisdom. When humans arrived, they were a mirror showing our failures. Instead of looking honestly, we tried to dim their light. She gestured at the display. Look what they accomplished without us, not despite us. Because freedom from restrictions let them help better than we would have. They weren't bound by protocols, procedures, our need for status quo. So what? Kelstra asked bitterly. We surrender to human dominance? I propose we admit we were wrong, Shalron said. I propose acknowledging the preservation protocols never protected the galaxy from dangerous young species. They protected old species from being surpassed. And I propose we ask humanity to help us become better, the chamber erupted. Some supported her. Others raged. But underneath the noise, Vornthic heard something terrifying. Agreement was forming. On Earth. Marcus Webb reviewed identical data. Director Jennifer Park stood beside him. The council is fragmenting, she observed. 15 more species requested direct partnerships this month. The council might not exist in another year. That's not our goal, Webb said firmly. We didn't withdraw to destroy them. We withdrew to free ourselves. The effect is the same. Maybe. Webb showed different data. Messages from across the galaxy. Requests for help. Offers of alliance. Gratitude. But look, we're not building an empire. We're building a network of equals. No hierarchy. No bureaucracy. Just species helping each other. It won't last, Park warned. Eventually you need structure, rules, accountability, greed. But those should serve cooperation, not control it. That was the Council's mistake. They built a system to maintain their power, then convinced themselves it benefited everyone. A communication alert chimed. Webb accepted. Chancellor Vornthic appeared. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Vornthic spoke with something Webb had never heard from him. Humility. Ambassador Webb, the Council requests a formal meeting to discuss our future relationship. Our relationship, Webb repeated. Not humanity's compliance? Vornthic's skin flushed, but he nodded. We were wrong. Not about everything, but enough. The preservation protocols were meant to prevent war, but became tools of control. We saw your advancement as threat when it was a gift. A reminder of what's possible when intelligence flourishes. Webb's expression softened. You could have admitted this a year ago. Pride is a powerful barrier, Vornthic said, as is fear. We feared becoming irrelevant. That fear made us cruel. The irony is trying to prevent obsolescence guaranteed it. The Council doesn't have to be obsolete, Webb offered. It just has to change. Change into what? That's not for me alone to decide. But if you're genuinely interested in reform, in building something better, maybe we can talk. 3 months later, representatives from Earth, remaining Council species, and dozens of independent worlds gathered at New Hope Station, a human-built facility in neutral. Spaced at the Constitutional Convention lasted 6 months and reimagined galactic civilization. Old Council dissolved. The Cooperative Assembly was founded on principles. Humanity insisted upon no species restricted in development, unless posing active, demonstrable threat. Technology shared freely with safety guidelines, not prohibitions. Membership voluntary and equal with influence based on contribution, not seniority. Young species having equal voice with old. And most radical, the Assembly's purpose facilitating cooperation, not enforcing control. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, now Earth's chief scientific advisor, addressed delegates on the final day. My grandfather saved the Mercian because he could think differently. Because humans hadn't learned some problems were unsolvable. For 200 years we brought that optimism while you kept us contained. Imagine what we could have accomplished as partners from the beginning. Imagine what we can accomplish now. The charter passed unanimously. Chancellor Vornthic. Now simply delegate Vornthic with no more authority than anyone else. Approached Webb after the ceremony. I spent 12,000 years believing we'd achieved civilization's pinnacle, he said quietly. That our role was preserving it. Humanity took 1 year to show me the real threat was our complacency. Webb extended his hand. The galaxy needs old wisdom and new energy. Alone, either is incomplete. Together, we might build something worthy of the word civilization. Vornthick clasped the hand, a gesture unthinkable 2 years earlier. One question, Vornthick said. When you withdrew from the council, had you planned all this? Webb smiled. We planned for the possibility, but honestly, we hoped it wouldn't be necessary. We hoped you'd choose change over pride. When you didn't, we made the choice ourselves. And if we'd responded with force, we would have fought and won. Webb grew serious. But victory through force would have been failure. The goal was never dominating the galaxy. It was freeing it. Force would just create new control. So you gambled on our better nature? We gambled on intelligent beings eventually recognizing truth. It just took longer than hoped. 5 years later, the Cooperative Assembly included over 600 species. More than the old council ever had. The difference was participation quality. Young species brought innovation and fresh perspectives. Old species brought wisdom and context. Together, they tackled problems festering for millennia under the old system. The Kreshkarn. Dominion peacefully dismantled with former slaves granted independence. Border conflicts resolved through human-pioneered mediation. Diseases cured. Famines ended. Civilizations welcomed without condescension. On Earth. Dr. Thelmus walked with Dr. Angela Rivera, discussing quantum mechanics without restrictions. Their research advanced further in 5 years than the previous 50. I was arrogant, Thelmus admitted. I thought your leaps were lucky guesses. I didn't understand human cognition processes information differently. Not better or worse. Differently, and that difference is valuable. Angela smiled. The real revelation? Every species is special. Every perspective unique. The Council's error wasn't underestimating humanity. It was overvaluing homogeneity. They wanted everyone developing the same way, thinking the same way, solving problems the same way. That's not wisdom. That's fear of diversity. In Mercian temples, new inscriptions commemorated the lesson, not honoring humanity specifically, but remembering what they taught. That wisdom isn't absence of change, but courage to change wisely. Marcus Webb, now retired, received a message from Vornthick. The Assembly wants to establish the Pioneers Award for those who challenge the galaxy to improve. You'll be first recipient. I hope you'll accept. Webb smiled and replied, I'll accept on behalf of every human who stood up to power when bowing down was easier. But remember, we didn't pioneer anything new. We remembered something old. That intelligence without freedom is sophisticated servitude. The real pioneers are those who admitted being wrong and chose change. That includes you, friend. On Liberation Day's anniversary, 1,000 species gathered at New Hope. They remembered the error that nearly doomed civilization to permanent. Mediocrity, choosing control over cooperation, valuing stability over justice, fearing change more than embracing it, believing one approach sufficient for infinite diversity, humanity hadn't saved the galaxy. They reminded it that saving was needed, then stepped aside to let everyone save it together. As celebrations continued, as former enemies became partners, as young and old worked side by side, one truth became undeniable. The day humans left galactic politics was the day the galaxy finally grew up. Retroclad can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.5